Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jason here. I know it's been a minute since I've last recorded and published a talk. It's been a pretty whirlwind 6 months or so for my family. My mother passed away in March, and as you can imagine, we've been dealing with all kinds of grief and logistics and memorial service planning and the aftermath. And needless to say, I've had a lot on my mind, but I've been wanting to get back to doing this. And recently I was reading a book by John D. Caputo, who, if you know me, you know that he's one of my favorite philosopher theologians. He's not really a theologian, he's a philosopher, but he does theology. And this book is called In Search of Radical Theology. And I was reading it recently, and I'm just about finished. And some of the concepts that he was talking about were kind of like triggering some thoughts in my head, and the wheels started to turn. And basically I got to the point where it's like, okay, I need to put some of these thoughts on paper and put it in some sort of form that is communicable and that makes sense so that I can talk about it with you all. So the topic that I want to address in this talk, and probably subsequent ones, I don't know how many, if this is going to be a series or just a one-off, but it's what I call Faitheism or Faitheist, right? Now, you may think, oh, I've never heard of that, but you can certainly figure out where I'm, getting this word from. It's taking the concept of faith and the concept of atheism and combining them into this label of Faitheist or Faitheism. And I know it sounds a bit, edgy or risky or unsafe, and it is, but it is a thing. I recently rediscovered, I knew about it years ago, but forgot, but there's a YouTube channel based on a website called the Philosophy Portal, and they offer these great courses in themes regarding philosophy and theology. And there's actually a course on there on the topic of Christian atheism, which sounds crazy. You think, what's Christian atheism? That's ridiculous. It's a contradiction in terms. But it harkens back to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer referred to as religionless Christianity, right? Or what Jacques Derrida called a religion without religion, okay? Christian atheism, this topic that is offered at the theology or the philosophy portal, it's got lectures by people like Peter Rollins, Slavoj Žižek, and others. And so it is a thing, right? This is not just me pulling this, out of thin air. This idea of Christian atheism is a thing. You could certainly trace it back to the death of God theology of the 1950s. Certainly back even further a little bit to Bonhoeffer. You can even go back all the way to the medieval mystics like Meister Eckhart and his famous prayer that God would rid me of God, right? Which is what I think was probably in the back of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's mind when he wrote in his prison correspondence before he was executed by the Nazis, that what God wants us to do is to live in the world as though God does not exist. And so there's something to this. Excuse me. And so I want to sort of put my own spin on it. I'm looking at it as I do all things theological and otherwise through the lens of exile and empire. And so I want to sort of unpack what this concept of religionless Christianity, Christian atheism, Faitheism, what it looks like through this lens that I've been developing in my own work, the lens of exile. So you might think to yourself, what's the point in other than being provocative for clicks or likes or whatever, of combining such antithetical or seemingly antithetical ideas as faith and atheism? What's the point of saying that you're a Faitheist or you adhere to Faitheism on some level? Well, I would suggest to those who are, skittish or wary of combining such seemingly antithetical things into one idea, I would suggest that the Incarnation opened the door to this a while ago, okay? What is the Incarnation? I mean, first of all, what is Christianity but the Incarnation? What is, especially in Catholicism, when I was a Reformed theologian, Presbyterian minister in the PCA, our lens was justification. right? And everything kind of went through Paul and through Romans and Galatians in particular. You know, as Martin Luther said famously, justification is the articulus stantis et cadentis ecclesiae. It's the article on which the church stands or falls. And so for Lutheran and Reformed theology, it's all about that doctrine of justification, this declarative pronouncement in the courtroom of heaven on the part of God the Father that we sinners are declared to be righteous in his sight, not based on our own works, but upon the work of Christ that is imputed to us through faith alone, right? That's Protestantism classically. In Catholicism, the lens is much more Christocentric. In Catholicism, it's all about the Incarnation and the Trinity, but in particular, the incarnation of the Son of God, right? And so if the incarnation, and that's of course central in every expression of Christianity, but in Catholicism, it's even especially so. But if the, not central dogma, but if the sort of focus is the incarnation, then we should have been done with this discomfort about combining seemingly antithetical ideas into one idea, right? Because what is the incarnation but the hypostatic union in one divine person of the human and divine natures of the second person of the Godhead, right? Divinity and humanity hypostatically united in the person of Christ, right? I remember in seminary at Westminster, we were taught that divinity and humanity never overlap. Divinity, ontologically, divinity and humanity never intersect. There is no, what's it called when the two Venn diagram? There's no overlap of those circles, right? Covenant we were taught, was the locus of God's dealings with us. And so God and man can meet together in this space of covenants, and this is where we are dealt with and our dealings with God happen. But there's never any ontological, intersection or overlap, which is odd when you consider the fact that, like, Jesus, you know what I'm saying? Jesus is, according to all of these different expressions of Christianity, the God-man, right? There is an ontological overlap of divinity and humanity in the one person of Christ, right? So this should not be something that we're just kind of wringing our hands or clutching our pearls going, oh my God, we can't combine these two opposite ideas together. Yeah, we can. In fact, this is not only an incredibly Christian instinct, and if you read G.K. Chesterton at all, you'll see him do this kind of thing all the time, but it's also the way of exile, right? Exile is all about the seeming folly, the foolishness of taking these ideas that seem at odds and juxtaposing them in a way that is ironic and disruptive, subversive and undermining of confessional theology. That's what radical theology is. That's what exile is in relation to empire.